In the quiet, sterile halls of intergalactic governance, some truths are held to be inviolable. They're codified over millennia, drawn from the collective wisdom of 1,000 star-faring species. These are the laws of physics, the math of orbital mechanics, and the universal classifications of celestial bodies. And among the most solemn of these is the designation for a Class A death world. This is a planet or moon so hostile to carbon-based life that its very existence is a cosmic warning. It's a place where the universe itself screams, "You shall not pass." For the Galactic Council, these designations weren't suggestions. They were scripture, a compassionate barrier to protect young, foolish species from their own deadly ambitions. Worlds with crushing gravity, acidic atmospheres, or searing radiation, all were catalogued, flagged, and put under strict interdiction. And then there was Titan, a moon shrouded in a permanent hazy orange twilight, orbiting the majestic ring giant, Saturn. To the Council's chief xenobiologist, a crystalline being of pure logic named Xylar, Titan wasn't just another death world. It was the archetype. The final exam every life form was destined to fail. Its file was less a scientific document and more a horror story. The Council had unanimously declared it uninhabitable, a verdict delivered with the grim certainty of a death sentence. Humanity, the galaxy's newest, loudest, and most baffling members, got the verdict, read the report, and promptly filed for development permits. The Council declared Titan uninhabitable. Humanity called it a starting point. The Galactic Council chamber was a vast, silent amphitheater where beings of light and shadow, of silicon and flesh, convened in mutual, orderly respect. At the central podium, Xylar resembled a cluster of luminous, slowly rotating crystals as he finished his presentation. His voice was a series of soft, resonant chimes translated into 1,000 languages at once. And thus the synthesized voice echoed, "We once again affirm the data. Surface temperature averages a staggering -179 degrees Celsius, or -290 degrees Fahrenheit. This isn't just cold, it is a cold so profound that water ice has the structural integrity of granite. The atmosphere, while thick, 1.5 times the pressure of the human homeworld, Earth, is a toxic soup of nitrogen and methane, with no free oxygen, and the surface is an abomination. It rains liquid methane. Great seas and lakes, not of water, but of liquid ethane and methane, churn under a sky that gets only 1% of the sunlight of a standard star system. Any attempt at colonization would be mass suicide. It is a Class A death world. The interdiction stands. We have sent this final report to the human delegation as one last formal warning. Xylar crystals gave a final somber pulse. A murmur of serene agreement rippled through the chamber. The matter was closed. Suddenly, a side door flew open. An assistant, a small, furry Krita named Fen, scurried in, his 4 ears pinned back in panic. He bypassed all protocol and rushed directly toward the central dais. "Hi, Counselor. Forgive me, but you have to see this. We're getting a transmission." The High Counselor, a being of pure thought who communicated in waves of empathic color, flashed a gentle, chiding blue. The color conveyed a simple rebuke. Transmissions were routed through proper channels. What could possibly be so urgent? Fen was practically vibrating. It's a live feed from the human delegation. They've routed it to all public channels. He fumbled with a data slate, paused, trembling. The feed is from the surface of Titan. A wave of confused purple emanated from the counselor. The meaning was unmistakable. That was impossible. The humans had acknowledged the warning. They had no sanctioned presence there. "Yes, Counselor," Fen squeaked as he projected the transmission into the main holographic display. "They don't have a sanctioned presence there." The serene silence shattered. The grand display, which had just shown Xylar grim data, flickered to life with a shaky helmet camera transmission. The sound was muffled by the crunch of boots on alien soil and the heavy breathing of a suit life support. Then came a voice. a ridiculously, horrifyingly mundane human voice. "All right, day 47 on Titan. The view from the new condo construction is spectacular. You can't beat that liquid methane sunset." The helmet camera panned upward. In the dim orange gloom, past the hazy silhouette of a massive, half-finished geodesic dome, one of Titan's vast hydrocarbon seas shimmered like black glass, reflecting the distant, shrouded glow of Saturn. For a long moment, the only sound in the chamber was the faint, rhythmic breathing from the human helmet. 1,000 of the galaxy's most sophisticated minds stared, dumbfounded at the impossible image. The very concept of condo construction on a world where the air was a cryogenic, flammable poison was so far outside their comprehension that their translation engines seemed to cycle through synonyms for madness. Xylar was the first to find his voice. His crystalline structure vibrated with a sharp, discordant chime. "This is a fabrication, a simulation. It must be a crude attempt at humor." The High Counselor pulsed a deep, troubled indigo, commanding Chief Engineer Zorgan to analyze the transmission and determine whether it was authentic. Zorgan, a squat, multi-limbed being whose species had engineered stars, furiously manipulated his console. After a tense minute, he grunted, a sound like grinding rocks. "The feed is authentic," he declared, his voice a low rumble of disbelief. Gravitational metrics match Titan's low-gravity environment. The suit's external sensors show an atmosphere of nitrogen and methane, consistent with our data. The temperature on the display is fluctuating between -178 and -1 Celsius. I am watching a live broadcast from the surface of Titan. The chamber erupted. Beings who hadn't spoken in centuries chattered in panicked disbelief. "They're outside. In that cold. What kind of life form builds on frozen volatiles?" The report said the hydrocarbons were a resource, chimed a hopeful delegate. "Perhaps they're there for peaceful study." On the screen, the human turned to another bulky figure. "Hey, Kevin, did you recalibrate the thermal drills? Command says if we hit another pocket of unrefined tholins, it gums up the excavators for hours." Kevin threw his hands up. "I told you, that's a software issue. Log another ticket with Planetary IT. I'm a structural engineer, not a code monkey." The argument was so bafflingly, suicidally normal. They weren't fighting for survival. They were complaining about their jobs. They were having IT problems. On a moon where the Council's most advanced probes froze solid in hours, Xylar internal light dimmed to a sickly gray. "They are not studying it," he chimed, his tone flat with dawning horror. "They are not exploring. They are subdividing." The High Counselor flashed a frantic query at Zorgan, demanding to know how their suits were functioning when the cold should leach heat with terrifying efficiency. Zorgan zoomed in on one of the figures. Titan's surface pressure is higher than their homeworlds, so the suits are primarily for thermal regulation and providing air. But the heating elements alone would require a monumental power source. He trailed off, his large eyes wide. They must be carrying miniature fission reactors, each one of them, to power the heating coils. A wave of revulsion swept the room. Carrying personal nuclear reactors was an act of barbarism. "They are walking bombs," Xylar whispered. "Walking, complaining bombs. And they are treating a sea of liquid fuel as a scenic backdrop." As if on cue, the helmet camera panned back to the methane lake. A holographic advertisement flickered to life nearby in a flowing, offensively cheerful script. It invited buyers to place down payments on the first phase of Titan Lakeside Estates, promising exclusive waterfront lots beside Kraken Mare, unbeatable views, zero light pollution, and the dream of cryogenic retirement living. A delegate from a species that communicated through interpretive dance went rigid and collapsed. The High Counselor's light shifted to a deep, alarming crimson. The humans were not merely colonizing a death world. They were gentrifying it. This new concept, this horrifying blend of commerce and survival, was utterly alien. Species colonized for need or for science, but building luxury real estate on a Class A death world was beyond reason. This wasn't ambition. It was the behavior of a species that saw a galactic interdiction notice and saw a marketing opportunity. A species that didn't just survive hostile environments, but saw them as fixer-uppers. A species that was, by all reasonable galactic standards, utterly insane. It was the behavior of orcs. Low culture, high tech, and a brutal, incomprehensible drive to build. The Galactic Council remained in emergency session, now unwilling spectators to the universe's most terrifying reality show. They watched, transfixed, as humanity didn't just defy the death world, but actively domesticated it with brute force engineering and cheerful nonchalance. On the Council's display, massive vehicles were drilling into the shoreline, not of rock, but of solid water ice as hard as granite. The excavated ice was carted into a large, glowing dome. Xylar forced himself to provide analysis. They are mining for water, a logical necessity, but the energy required to melt it and perform electrolysis for oxygen means the power consumption must be astronomical. As if to answer, the transmission revealed a thick pipe running from the ice mining operation to a colossal facility on the edge of the methane sea. A massive pump was drawing liquid hydrocarbons directly from the lake. By the void, Zorgen the engineer rumbled. They're using the methane. They're burning it with oxygen harvested from the water ice to generate power. They've turned the entire moon into a fuel tank. A trade delegate who valued economic subtlety fainted. Using a planet's primary surface liquid as a combustible fuel source was like a civilization deciding to power its cities by burning its own air. It was efficient, yes, but monstrously reckless. It's a closed system, Zorgen continued, a note of horrified admiration in his voice. They mine ice for water. They split the water into oxygen for breathing and combustion, while the hydrogen feeds industrial cells. The waste heat warms the habitats. It's disgustingly elegant. The next feed showed the settlement's interior. Outside was a frozen orange hellscape. Inside looked like a high-end ski lodge. Humans walked around in shirt sleeves. Through a triple-paned viewport, the desolate landscape of Titan was just a scenic vista. One of them laughed while describing a delayed coffee shipment. He tells me it was delayed by solar flares. I'm like, dude, we're on Titan. We get 1% of Earth's sunlight on a good day. What do we care about solar flares? They were complaining about imported luxuries while living on a galactic tombstone. But the true, species-defining moment of insanity was yet to come. A new transmission came from the recreation and morale team at Site B. It showed humans in bulky suits gathered around a transparent dome containing a pool of shimmering liquid methane. A banner announced the inaugural Titan Polar Bear Club plunge. Xylar crystalline form flickered violently. No, they would not. The thermal shock serves no purpose. It is a ritual of pure, unadulterated madness. The human on the platform gave a whoop, yelled for the Grandman, and jumped. He plunged into the cryogenic fluid. The council leaned forward, expecting the suit to crack to see a flash-frozen corpse. Instead, the human re-emerged with a triumphant roar, his suit crackling as a thin film of frozen atmosphere vanished. His friends cheered. He clambered out, shivering theatrically. Woo! That's brisk. Okay, who's next? Hot chocolate in the mess hall. That was the breaking point. The delegate for the Tukon Imperium, a species renowned for logic, slowly and deliberately rested his forehead on his console. He didn't faint. He simply gave up. The High Counselor pulsed a frantic cascade of colors, demanding to know what the human meant by the gram, and why anyone would willingly immerse themselves in a substance that could freeze stars. A junior human liaison, forgotten, in a corner, finally spoke up. It's for fun. It's a challenge to prove you can do it, like climbing a mountain. The council turned to face her. She had just explained the inexplicable with an explanation that was even more insane. They did it for fun. They faced down a lethal environment not for science, not for profit, but for bragging rights. A philosopher-poet from Andromeda put the pieces together, his translated voice soft with terrible clarity. We have been blind. We saw their recklessness and volatility as weaknesses. We believed them to be an immature species needing our protection. He gestured toward the screen where humans were now lining up to jump into the methane pool. These are not flaws. They are their strength. This is a species that treats survival as a competitive sport. They don't see a death world and calculate risks. They see a death world and ask, what's the course record? Their stubbornness isn't a refusal to listen. It's a pathological inability to comprehend failure. We classified Earth as a paradise. From their perspective, Earth was the training ground. It was the death world they had already conquered. He paused. We've been calling them brash and reckless. We've been using the wrong words. The correct word, he said, as the council listened in horrified silence, is Orakud, aggressive race, with enough tech to be a menace, but with the primal spirit to never ever stop. We gave a new mountain to a species of obsessive, terrifying climbers, and now they're building a ski resort on the summit. The revelation hung in the chamber, more chilling than Titan's own atmosphere. The term space orcs wasn't just an insult. It was becoming a terrifyingly accurate descriptor. They were loud, chaotic, and possessed an unstoppable drive to build in places no sane species would ever touch. The emergency session stretched on. The shock had been replaced by a cold, creeping dread. Zorgan the engineer, after hours of frantic analysis, spoke again. Their expansion rate is illogical, he rumbled. They are using Titan's resources to build the infrastructure to get off Titan. He brought up intercepted schematics. They aren't building rockets. The gravity is low, but the atmosphere is incredibly thick. Instead, they're designing winged craft. With low gravity and dense air, a human could literally fly with strap-on wings. They plan to use hot air balloon principles, filling massive envelopes with heated, breathable air from their habitats. Since that air is less dense than the cold nitrogen outside, it will be buoyant. They can build flying bases, atmospheric shuttles, and airborne mining platforms. He pointed to another design. And for propulsion? They're kicking around ideas for ramjets that would inhale the methane-rich atmosphere and combust it. They are turning the entire sky into a highway and a fuel station. The implications were staggering. Humans wouldn't be confined to their domes. They would master the skies of Titan, creating a civilization that floated in the orange clouds. Xylar chimes were a low thrum of anxiety. This changes everything. We assumed they would be contained by the sheer hostility of their chosen home, but Titan's hydrocarbons are hundreds of times more abundant than all the fossil fuels of their homeworld combined. They won't just be self-sufficient. They will become an industrial superpower. He brought up a final, terrifying projection. Titan isn't their home. It's their shipyard. It's the Titan of Assembly, as one of their documents called it. We thought they were trapped in a cage. They see it as an armory. This was the true horror. The Council saw death worlds as resource sinks. Humanity saw them as resource troves, precisely because no one else was foolish enough to want them. They had a monopoly on the galaxy's most dangerous real estate, and they were discovering it was also the most valuable. The High Counselor pulsed a deep, solemn maroon, a color of profound regret. The classification had to be revised, not just for Titan, but for the human species itself. At the Counselor request, Xylar faced the Assembly and formally revised humanity's species profile in the Galactic Codex. Humanity was now designated an class threat, with the classification Arch-Kin. It is the conclusion of this council that we have fundamentally misunderstood the human species. Our assessments were based on a flawed premise, that the drive for survival is universal. For humans, survival is merely the prerequisite for their true core directive, progress. He paused. We defined habitability by a narrow band of parameters. This is the garden world paradigm. Humanity operates on a different one, the workshop world. For them, a planet's value is not measured by its hospitality, but by its utility. Is there a stable surface? Are there raw materials? Is there an energy gradient to exploit? By this metric, Titan is not a death world. It is a paradise of industry. Their supposed weaknesses are their most terrifying strengths. Their chaotic social structure fosters rapid, reckless innovation. They do not fear failure, they are infuriated by it and will expend disproportionate resources to overcome it out of sheer stubborn pride. We observed them performing acts of life-threatening foolishness for recreation. This is not low intelligence. It is environmental normalization. By turning a lethal hazard into a game, they psychologically conquer it. Today, they jump into a methane lake for sport. Tomorrow, they will build submarines to chart its depths. Therefore, the classification death world is obsolete as it applies to human expansion. Any planet deemed too hostile should now be flagged as a prime candidate for human settlement. They do not seek gardens. They seek challenges. They are the space orcs, and the galaxy is full of mountains for them to climb. A few weeks later, the main screen showed the settlement again. The Titan Lakeside Estates had progressed at a horrifying pace. The main dome was complete, glowing with life. Outside, along the shores of the black methane sea, smaller condo domes were now in place. The image settled on a new building, with a large viewport overlooking Kraken Mare. A blinking neon sign identified it as the Starlight Lounge and Grill. Inside, human figures sat at tables and enjoyed a meal in the heart of the eternal, frozen twilight. They had built a restaurant at the end of the universe. The old galaxy of rules and reason was gone. A new one was dawning, an age of loud, messy, and terrifyingly determined pioneers who saw a sign that said, "Here be dragons," and immediately started drawing up plans for a dragon saddle factory. The human race, in all its stubborn, illogical, and glorious absurdity, was here to stay, and the universe would never be the same. What death world in our own solar system do you think humanity should colonize next, to horrify the aliens? The sulfuric acid clouds of Venus? The radiation-blasted ice of Europa? Let me know your most audacious settlement plans in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this glimpse into humanity's terrifying future, be sure to like and subscribe for more tales of when humans prove to be the scariest thing in the cosmos.